Hey, welcome back, guys. This is Preston, aka Wildcore, with another fabulous episode of GKD, Generational Knowledge Deficit. In this episode, we're actually going to talk about a new topic that's not necessarily a trade or an item itself. It's not necessarily a skill, but it is the act of using trades and skills of the sort. This is going to be about work ethic. It's a big topic recently. There was a conversation, it's kind of raving through TikTok that I'm part of. I've seen a lot of going on about it. So, the idea behind a work ethic and how it plays into the GKD is that work ethics have changed over the years. And I don't believe that it's necessarily the product of the word work ethic. I think it's because over the years, the reasons that we go to work has changed. The reasons that we need to work, the reasons that we want to work, all comes together to become the work ethic. But I believe that the reasons are different. And I'm going to go over that with this episode. And then the next episode is actually going to be a part two where I bring a very special guest in that their work ethic was for a whole different reason when they were younger. And it itself has changed. And we're going to talk about their skill and trade that they learned that was part of their own reasoning for their work ethic. So sit back and listen, tune into this. We're going to be talking about work ethics. So if I want to go back and I want to think about what work ethic means to me, a work ethic is your drive to do some sort of action. I don't necessarily believe that it is specifically about going to work. I know work is in the title, but I believe it is about the willpower to get up and do the something that you need to do and for whatever purpose. It's not necessarily the opposite of being lazy. I think that you can have lazy times and still be someone with a good work ethic. Everybody needs a little bit of relaxation. But I think the purpose of a work ethic is what's changed over the years. And like I said, we're going to have a guest on the next part that's actually going to give us their side work ethic. And sorry about that. And we're going to learn about that. So I'm just going to go with what I believe a work ethic for myself is in 2024. My work ethic is not the strongest, I got to be honest. And I think it is because of my ADHD, but honestly, it's all of that is part of me. And maybe ADHD gives me a false sense of a work ethic, but I would be the first to let you know my shortcoming is the lack of a real work ethic drive. I definitely want what I want, and I know I have to go and attack it, and I know I have to tackle the thing I want. But my problem with my ADHD is that I want so many different variables that find it hard to continue after that original euphoria and endorphins of creating the idea or the thing. So my work ethic slides off over time as I build into something. And I think that goes back to what I'm bringing this up for. Let's say 50 years ago, our grandparents or our parents, depending on when you were born, would have been in roughly, 1970s to 80s, that area there. I think that work ethic is probably the last real working ethic that you had to have. I believe that our parents, I did say grandparents, but I believe our parents of my generation, so they're roughly about 50 years old to 70 is our parental, from my perspective. That's our generation and my parents' generation. I think their work ethic was instilled on them from their generational parents. And their reasons for their work ethic is not the same as their parents. So let's go back even further to our grandparents. So we're talking 1920s, 30s up to 1970s, that area, that 30-year range there. Their work ethic was designed and created by the will to live, the reasons to live. They had to have that work ethic in order to live, in order to have food, in order to provide, to make children, provide for those children. Everyone struggled back then unless they were wealthy. Everyone in that I know of in that time definitely had to work extremely hard to make something, whether that something was barely to put bread on the table or if that something was to have a home, a life, a farm. I happen to live on the family farm that was created a long time ago. And this family farm was created, and it's only still here because of the work ethic of my grandparents. And I think that that work ethic for them was a will, it was required to live. And then, so if we look at our parents up 20 to 30 years from that, their work ethic was starting to change. Their work ethic was less of that was what you had to do to live, and more or less that's what you had to do to have something better than the bare minimum. You can go to work and not have a work ethic. You can go to work and go work your job and come home and have a normal meander standard, you chose to just go to work and come home. That's not having a work ethic. You'll be the first one to call out, you don't need to go to work. You don't want to go to work. There's a lot of people that use these systems that are in place in order to supplement that work ethic. They have government benefits, maybe, or they have a small wealth from their families, or they have family and friends that can give them, or realistically, yes, this world has gotten harder, but I think that that generation had a lot to go on, so their work ethic was kind of changed. They wanted to work hard to change what they were raised on, to change and become better, and to bring this world into where we're at now. We only have the technology, the devices, the tools that we have because of that middle generation. The very beginning generation that I can go back to, I mean, obviously there was plenty of people alive before the 1920s and 30s. I'm not going there. I'm going to go back to what we can tangibly find out there in this world right now. They built tools in the 1930s to 70s to create the jobs. 1970s to, I would say, 90s to 2000 were refining those tools, creating new tools that are based off the original tools. So the work ethic changed. It changed to how can we make this less hard? The original was how to live. The middle generation is how to make this less hard, how to refine and use our work ethic to actually change the world in our generation. Then now our generation, I would say 2000s, I was born in the 90s, so I would say 90s, 2000s, this generation has the lowest work ethic because so much is already at its peak potential. There's not a lot that, unless you have a revolutionary idea, there's not a lot that your work ethic is going to change. You can go to work, have a standard wage now in 2024 that pays for a decent part of things. I don't mean you can go work a fast food or an industrial rate job and live okay. I mean that you could have a blue collar job that pays 20, 30, 40, or $50 an hour and not have a crazy education, and you don't have to have a work ethic to do that. You can go to work, you can work your 40 or 50 hours, you can go home and still create a life. Our generation that I'm part of has done a lot of life. We seem to want more life and less of the I want to have a better life and I want to make better that our parents had. So if we go back, we had the very first part of this generational knowledge deficit that we're talking about, where their work ethic from our grandparents was to live, period. They had it hard. They had to have a work ethic in order to have anything. The middle generation, our parents, their work ethic was more or less to refine what they had, to design anew what they had, and to start to mold into things final spots. No one was inventing the sock in 1930s. They were inventing the machines so that way you didn't have to build them by hand. And yes, there was machines built in 1800s. I'm not putting this to a perfect science. I'm giving you ideas and examples. But the 70s, our parents were designing how to change those things, how to build them different. Now those generations are going to automate things, how to make even less work. And in my opinion, the work ethic has started to phase off with my generation. There is a lot more. I work and it's just to provide what I need. I don't need anything more. I don't have to have a crazy hard work ethic. And I think that that's the problem with this generation's work ethic. There's not a lot that working extremely hard is going to provide that working standard can't provide. I don't mean that you can't buy a Lamborghini if you work a standard job, because you're not going to. not if you have a child or anything that may take funds in pets, a house, things like that. So you have to have that heavy work ethic. You can't expect those things and expect to be, wealthy and have these things that you may dream of without that work ethic. I think that my generation is not necessarily being dealt a bad hand, but I believe that we were given the fruits of our previous two generations, our parents and our grandparents. We were given everything they worked for. All of their hard work was to design the world to be better and easier and more economical and just easier. And now we are living on the fruits of all of their work ethic. And I highly feel that this generation has a struggle creating these trades, listening to these trades, learning these trades, because there's no reason to learn how to do something the way it was done 70 years ago in a lot of people's minds, or even 80 years ago. And that's why I created this podcast, because I think that is a major problem. I highly, highly, highly believe that just because we don't have a reason to have this skill, this trade, this heavy work ethic, does not mean that these things should die off. It doesn't mean that we should lose them. And we're going to. I am so afraid that we are going to lose the skills, trades, generational technology, tools, and ideas. And we laugh about it, that there's kids that don't know what an 8-track are. We laugh that my children and children of their children don't know what a VCR tape is. That's not what I'm talking about. That's technology itself. That's tools themselves. And I'm not a doomsdayer. I'm not saying that if we lost power, you need to know how to live, but you should know how to do these basic things. And if we don't teach anybody, there's not going to be someone to live off of one day. There's not going to be these things that just hand you everything in the case something does happen. And I think it's my generation's job to step back and go, wait, we need to pass along information that we weren't given. How do we do that? How do we pass on information we weren't given? We don't even have the work ethic to learn the things that we weren't told about. I highly feel that my generation goes to work and comes home and plays. Yeah, video games play a big part in that. I'm not going to go down that road, but we play. We do the things that we can with what we do. And it's all comes down to our work ethic. We are not required. We don't have to have a strong work ethic to literally live. But yet generations prior to us have to. The generations prior to us have to work hard to live. And they have to change their own timeline and their own things. And they have to create their own work ethic from the inside. And I think my generation needs a kick in the butt. We need to figure it out. And it's insane to think that I'm saying this and I'm part of this generation and I know it. I can see it. But how many of us don't see it? I know I have a lot of listeners that are not in my generation. They're older generation. They're my parents' generation, even maybe my grandparents' generation. And when you listen to this, I want you to look and think how your work ethic, what drove you to do as good as you did? And if you didn't do as good as you did, what was missing to make you drive forward? Was it the work ethic? Do you think it was the lack of a skill or trade? And then look at your children. If you are my generation and you have kids, look at your children and look at how you can instill a better work ethic in them, because they don't have to have this work ethic to live. They need this work ethic and they don't know it. So again, if you're in the previous two generations, I'd like you to message me. I'd like you to send it into the podcast. You can either do that through Facebook. You can look up Preston Richardson. That's me. You can, if you're listening through Spotify, you can click the button and send a link, send a message in. Let me know what created your work ethic. Was it the drive to live? Was it required? Was it the thought of making something better than what your parents had? Or was it because you needed to provide for the generation in front of you? Or are you part of my generation and you don't have a work ethic? Or you don't understand why you don't? Or if it's completely something else, absolutely. So I want to end this podcast, let you guys know again, reminder that the next the next podcast episode is actually going to be a part 2 of this episode where we bring someone in from one of the previous generations, and we're going to talk about why they have their work ethic and what drove their work ethic and why, and they actually learned a skill from it. So I'm excited for that. I've got to get them in here. They're going to be an in-person podcast. I can't wait for it, you guys, and I hope to hear some feedback from you guys. Thank you.